one of the most important things to ask the sellers whether they paid a large or any special levy in the past. Why am I asking? Because oftentimes they pay a huge special levy, and there will be some refund. Okay, and if we don't get an assignment and proxy clause into the contract with the buyer, then any refund that comes after the completion of the deal will be whose money? The new owners, because the special levy always gets paid to the current owner, even if that current owner completed the deal a day before. So in that case, the listing agent needs to pay attention whether there is any money coming back or there's any chance of money coming back. Okay? And it's called assignment and proxy because the new owner, the buyer at that point, will assign this refund back to the seller because it's rightfully his or hers. And the proxy part is if there's any general meeting regarding that refund, the buyer will provide the seller a proxy so he can make a decision. Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. Now, this assignment and proxy is not something that we need to draft because we are just not, at least I'm not qualified to come up with, unless you guys are moonlighting as lawyers, but I am not. My job is to put in a clause that secures, okay, subject to the seller and the buyer agreeing and signing a proxy and assignment agreement by such and such a date. This condition is for the sole benefit of the buyer or for the seller. I would say the seller rather. Okay, and then you send the buyer to the buyer's lawyer and make him draft a properly worded proxy, and then these people will sign, and then you remove the subject. Does it make sense? So don't try to come up with your own. I was handing out a sample one that Peter DiMeo kindly provided to us, but yet again, it is a sample. It's not the one that you're gonna number into the contract. Okay? So we touched on the appreciation. Any question about this? No, not really. The Form B, as you said, also an essential document to find out the status of the parking and storage, because it can be confusing. It can be very confusing. Just last week, I had to deal with an issue whereby the section, Strata Corporation, commercial section, and then we have the residential section, but they both use the same underground parking. Okay? What the developer did, the developer actually designated large sections of the underground parking as limited common property for the residential section. Does it make sense? Okay, meaning that the commercial guys could not use it. It's exclusively for the residential section. However, within that limited common property area, the actual parking spaces were common property. What does it mean?
They could be assigned.
Okay, that's exactly. So within that limited common property parking area, the Strata Corporation, actually the section for the residential council for the residential section could actually just assign it. For example, I used to run Strata Management Division for a while, and it's really up to the Strata Council. Let's say your parking space is right next to the entrance, but now I have an elderly person who would have a hard time, negotiating the long walk. I'm going to ask you, could you please switch places, switch spots? And you're kind of upset because that was a nice wide one. But we're going to say, listen, that's the way the cookie crumbles. We have the right to assign you a different space. But there's nothing you could do really. Now, we never did it unreasonably. Okay, so we didn't, and management companies don't like to upset the apple cart. They're not going to make changes unless it's necessary, but you need to understand, and the buyer needs to understand, it is possible in a common property. The same thing, common property parking. Same applies to storage. It comes as a surprise, but sometimes you can get some angry calls when you're the listing agent and you have a common property storage, those cubicles. And you're gonna say, all right, storage number 14, the listing, and on the disclosure statement. And by the time the buyer takes possession, it's switched over to another level, for example. And then you get, so why did you tell me mine is 14? Well, that's what it was. So we need to understand and need to convey the importance of common property versus limited common property. Limited common property will stay with the unit. Okay? Now, let's talk about limited common property because yet again, it may be an issue. How do strata corporations create limited common property designation?
It's registered on the strata plan.
Okay? Any other idea? Two ways. It can be done by the developer from the get-go, and it's nicely filed in the strata plan, and it's neatly written on every single parking space. It's gonna say CP lot 32, right? We know that's limited common property. But sometimes the stratas can take a shortcut, and they can designate common property as limited common property by a vote at a general meeting. And what happens, they still need to file a land title, they still need to file this resolution and a sketch. The sketch oftentimes is basically just a copy of the strata plan and drawn in what they did. But so there's two ways to create limited common property. Of course, my preference would be refiling the strata plan, but some stratas just don't want to do it because it's expensive. But the only problem with this type of SCP designation, what is the main problem? It can be reversed the same way. The strata can take a vote at an AGM, say, you know what? We don't want that SCP anymore. And there you go. There goes my parking space. So that's what we need to keep in mind. Anything else about documents that you'd like to mention, or have you ever come across problems with strata docs? Now here's the deal. If you're acting for a buyer, I respectfully recommend to you to get what? An exclusive buyer's agency agreement, right? Don't be shy about it, that's the future. And one of the main reasons, if you don't have an exclusive buyer's agency agreement with the buyer, then your obligations are limitless. You didn't have a chance to basically nail down what you're gonna do, right? If you don't nail it down, you're expected to do everything. So it's way better to actually put it on paper, and you explained your marketing area, you explain what services you're gonna be providing. And for example, if you're not comfortable with analyzing and interpreting the strata documents and the depreciation report and the finances, then you can put it in Schedule A, that the buyer shall use the services of a professional to analyze and interpret strata documentation, such as Condo Clear, I think that guys can, or an appraiser can do that.
Yeah.
Right? So you can actually put that clause in. I sent that clause out a few weeks ago. You can do it again.
It's on the website.
It's on the website, even better. Now, I'm not saying you should do that, but if you don't feel comfortable or fully competent, to analyze those minutes and documents and financials, then use that clause and shift the risk from yourself to another professional. Okay? And if the buyers know from the get-go they will have to pay for that, I don't think they will have a problem. Okay? Does it make sense? Yes, it does.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Are there places, or are there businesses who do that? That's why I'm
Yes.
talking.
For example, Pacific Rim appraisers, they do that. I believe Island Depreciation, they, Russ Gass, he will do especially the depreciation report part of it. And then there's a Condo Clear.
Condo
Condo
Ryan's
area,
doing
Yeah, so there are options that you can give to the buyer, all right? Now, it doesn't mean that you're not gonna take a look at the minutes. You still have an obligation to read through because you're the buyer's agent. And I usually, what I used to do is I just lay it out. I just lay it out month by month and then AGM minutes and then just read on. And suddenly you realize it takes about an hour and a half to read through 2 years worth of minutes, but suddenly it makes sense because you're gonna get a deeper sense how this place is being operated. And then you're gonna take a look at the AGM minutes and resolutions and go, so you also know which direction they're going to. And then all you need to do is just get a highlighter and just highlight certain things that you wanna get answers for. And that's all you need to do, really. Okay? So you have a better understanding. Financial statements, in my opinion, they're not really complicated to analyze. I usually use it to measure against the depreciation report. Because to me, it's a great indication what I'm getting my buyers into. Is it a well-funded, well-looked-after startup, or is it like a deferred maintenance heaven that just want the new guys to pay for decades of neglect? Because that happens as well. You know, I had my favorite Strata complex on the gorge. It was built in the 80s. There's $50 million worth of special levy to be paid. It used to be 10 years, now it's 7 because they haven't done anything. And the council doesn't seem to be very concerned about it. How much? $50 million. Buildings not
Is
worth
that
that.
Cedar Shores?
Cedar Shores,
Yeah.
260 units.
it.
And RDH, the depreciation report, RDH is one of the best, if not the best, engineering companies in Victoria. And it's black and white, man. It's black and white right in my face. And there's nothing, well, very, very little being done. But if you take a look at the depreciation report and you read it very carefully, and then you take a look at the budget and you see how much they are collecting into it, there will be some pressure on the owners, definitely. And the same pattern can be observed in startup corporations. They know it's coming, but you know what? We can wait. Now, the problem is the decision-making people on council, they're usually unqualified to make such decisions. They have the power to make decisions to delay, but they make these decisions based on their own consensus, not on facts. Back in Hungary, we have a nice, I don't think it really translates well into English, but you know, when the ostrich shoves his head into the sand,
An ostrich syndrome, you have the sand goes away.
that pretty much describes. And me as an agent, as a buyer's agent, I have an obligation to actually recognize that it doesn't mean this is a bad deal. But I will tell the buyer, listen, this is what's coming at you. Maybe we should go back in light of this and negotiate some money. off the price. So it's not a deal breaker, but we need to actually let them know. Does it make sense? Yes. Kevin, any observations so far? No. So once again, if you are, because I silently slid over to the buyer's agents, not sure if you noticed. So what else will cause you problems when it comes to minutes?
Well,
It's-
it's usually the last 2 years, right? So if there's something's happened 3 or 4 years ago, you wouldn't know about it unless you had some sort of a flag, from
Yeah.
some other direction.
Interestingly enough, if you actually take the time to read the minutes, you're gonna have some sense if there's some ongoing stuff from the past visiting back. But what puzzles me is, let's say I have a buyer and you're the listing agent, and I make an offer on your listing, or we make an offer on your listing, and you provide this set of documents, which is on addendum 2, Strata addendum 2. You provided everything. And then once I get the package, I just realize the Form B is older than me, and I'm no spring check.
Yeah.
Okay? It's useless for me. It's like 9 months old.
Yes.
That's one problem. What's the other one? Once you provide me that package, the seller has no obligation to provide me anything else until completion, right? I'm kept in the dark. Anything happens, you don't have to give me or forward to me unless you're dealing with Steve. Because Steve will respectfully ask in the contract that the Form B is going to be provided with a current date. Okay? And then you're going to put another clause in whereby the seller shall continue forwarding all Strata documentation all the way to completion. All right? And what else would I do?
Transfer proxy.
Once the deal goes unconditional, the seller will provide the buyer what?
Proxy.
A proxy to all general meetings, because it's only fair. At that point, the deal is solid. Okay? So please don't make decisions for me because you'll be gone. So these 3 things, please keep in mind. Form B needs to be correct, that needs to be current to be useful. Okay?
3 weeks.
3 weeks is fine, less than 3 weeks preferable. Why?
Could be a change on that.
Because a notice for an AGM or an SGM.
2 weeks, 3 days to post the notice and 4 days for the.
There you go. So if I have an order Form B, I may not even know what's going on. So fresh Form B, seller shall provide Strata documents promptly all the way to completion, right? And then the seller shall provide the buyer a proxy, irrevocable proxy upon the deal going unconditional. And I see unconditional proxy for general meetings.
Well, you're not protected if you get a Form B that, might be 6 weeks old, but you're supposed to keep, the seller's agent's supposed to keep you updated on any changes, any correspondence to the owner, things like that. Are you not
Where
protected
is it?
that way?
Where is it?
Well, if there's a issuance of a notice of an annual general meeting or some emergency thing comes up that goes to the owner, they're supposed to provide.
When you say suppose based on what duty?
An
Because
additional clause,
in
it's
there.
in there, there isn't anything standard, but you're gonna add it anyways.
Yeah.
To tell them to
Keep you updated.
any communication from Strata you want to be informed of.
I think that's in the
that will-
contract.
That will tie into what you're saying, right?
So, so
So
the
if they
main,
call us an AGM, now you'd be notified because it's in the clause of the contract.
Correct.
But your problem might be remedy though. What if they don't tell you? Now you go complete anyways. Now how do you fix your problem?
Mhm.
Whereas if you had that, if you had,
You make it a fundamental term of the
Yeah.
contract. So at the closing day, it turns around, you find out they didn't provide you with something saying that, hey, the roof needs doing some.
now pets aren't allowed anymore.
Yeah,
well,
and you didn't
That's
find
in
out,
the
you could just say, no, I'm out.
let me put it this way. I don't want to get lost in legalities because I'm not qualified. I'm qualified to get lost, but I'm not qualified to advise you. However, this is the only way I can envision your buyer being promptly informed of any communication from the Strata Corporation. And it's very useful. And also, if there's a proxy, then I will know I can represent myself and vote according to my own instructions. So I would certainly include those 3 items in an offer. And, but let's make sure, we need to be reasonable at the same time. If I'm asking you, I'm the buyer's agent, you're the listing agent. If I'm asking you to provide us with a current Form B, I have to actually give you enough time to provide one. I mean, I can't really say, all right,
I need it in 2 days.
well, at least 4 or 5 days or some reasonable time frame. And then I need to look through the minutes. So we need to think of the logistics. But I can't really say, okay, give me a fresh Form B by tomorrow, 8 a.m. or whatever. It's just not cool. It's not gonna work. Right?
Sometimes your lender needs that current Form B anyway. I've had a lender say to me, this Form B is too old, I need a new one.
Well, obviously, I mean, the lenders are responsible for their shareholders and investors, so I would do the same. Do you guys have any other issue or any other concern? Any question online?
No.
How many people do we have?
6.
Cool.
But we started 15 minutes late, so we lost some, just so you know.
Okay, well, of course, people will be able to listen.
Yeah, I
right?
recorded the whole
Okay.
thing, yeah.
Now, one piece of good news, I want to wrap this up. Probably you heard of larger strata buildings where the underground garage was leased out by the developer prior to the first AGM. And these buyers, they buy their little strata lot, and they actually have to lease their own parking space from a third-party company, right? It will not be legal anymore. Basically, they are doing away with this opportunity, so developers can't really do this fancy footwork prior to the first AGM. I never understood why they could. I always found it very unjust and unfair, because these lease agreements, they were for 50 years and 100 years and some unreasonable amount of time. And the bad thing is that third-party company, which is probably not arm's length with the developer, they can actually turn around anytime and start charging money for the parking spaces, because they have the right. Most of them still don't. I haven't heard one in Victoria that charges, but in their head lease, they certainly could. And the other thing is, you need to, if you could please, when you're acting for buyers and you buy into condominium buildings where there are fewer spaces, parking spaces, than units. Unfortunately, more and more you can see downtown. Please look into the mechanism in the bylaws, how they allocate them, okay? Because you may run into problems that you want to rent it out and it's legal to rent, no problem. However, every time when the renter changes, you would lose. It goes back into the bottom of the wait list. So if you could please just take the time and understand the mechanics. If you have any question, go back as many times as you need to the management company until you understand, so you can actually explain to the buyer. Because there's nothing worse than a buyer coming back and calling you a few months later. All right, so strata developments are the future as density increases, and it forces us to keep up with the changes and better understand how to analyze the product we're selling or buying. And that's why we have this little class this morning. I respectfully recommend to you to take Strata 101 and what's the other one?
Fundamental Stratus 1 and there's 2.
Two.
It's called Strata Fundamentals 1 and Strata.
Fundamentals 1 and 2, because it really clears up many, many aspects that we didn't even think of. And I think that the lawyer's name is Mr.
Justin
Justin.
Nelson.
Bright Guy.
I just wanted to add too, because I did take that last week and it's an amazing course. And the thing I didn't know, and this is bizarre that I didn't know this, but when it says a 3/4 vote, I always assumed that it meant 3/4 of all the
No.
owners, but it turns out it's only whoever shows up at the meeting.
And they made a quorum.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's why
quorum.
That's why I backed owners, because the Strata Property Act says 1/3 of all owners will make quorum. And then
And then of that.
3/4 of those who showed up can make fundamental changes. They can enact bylaws that you couldn't even dream of. And so when you guys are acting for buyers and the time comes for completion, instead of buying flowers and chocolate and all kinds of stuff, buy them a subscription to the condominium manual. It may not be as flashy and
Yeah.
but it's really good, because the condominium manual by Mike Mangan will explain just about all possible aspects of it in plain English, even I understand, without having to read through twice or 3 times. And it gives examples and gives references to the law. So I think that's a better choice. And please urge your buyers to get involved in this. Don't just live there and pay the strata fee. Because there's a difference between carefree living and careless living.
Yeah.
So if you don't participate, you don't keep your eyes on the strata governance and what's going on, then you allow other people to make decisions for you and maybe against your interest. And I cannot emphasize this strongly enough. We need to very gently and respectfully educate our buyers. This is a community living and you need to take part of it. Otherwise, bad things may happen. Okay, not to mention the fact they will be happier because they will understand that the strata fees are collected for actual costs, not just the tax, which I hate to pay, because I heard that before. And when the strata fee increases, they need to be justified. They need to be proven why we have an increase in strata fees and how much of it is being saved for future expenses. So the educated buyer is our objective, I think. Okay, is there anything else? No? Well, if you have any question, or even the online listeners or viewers have any question, please throw me an email. I will respond as soon as I can. My email address is steve@phre.ca. Well, thank you very much, I appreciate it. Right.
How was your homework?
Oh,